Welcome back. In a moment, we'll talk more about internet safety. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. The former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, is to stand trial after accusations his party hid $24 million in an illegal campaign finance case, which dates back to 2012. Mr. Sarkozy has repeatedly denied that he was aware of the overspending. Israel has passed a law which retrospectively legalises the building of 4,000 new settler homes on Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank. The vote, which passed by 60 votes to 52, and despite a senior lawyer calling it unconstitutional, has been called legalised theft by the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And Haiti's president-elect, Jovenel Moïse, has been inaugurated today following the country's November election, ending nearly a year of transitional rule by the interim president, Jacques Prévert, and his government. Assuming the country's presidency, the controversial new leader is the centre of a government money laundering probe. Let's return to the conversation about Internet Safety Day, and I've got a couple of guests who can guide us through some of the potential pitfalls. Noel Bell is a clinical psychotherapist specialising in internet issues relating to mental health, and also with us is Jason Murdoch, who is the technology and cybersecurity reporter at the International Business Times. Welcome to you both. Noel, we want to use the internet for all the good things, for that amazing array of information and potential learning or entertainment or everything else. But there is a downside. How do we deal with the downside?
The downside is being aware of what can go wrong, leaving young people with unsupervised access. So the key is to have open communication, to make sure that they know the risks involved by engaging online. People are not always who they appear to be online, and when you are releasing information about yourself, video, photos, you might have trust, and young people want to engage in trust. It's their way of connecting, but there are risks associated with that.
But as parents, we all know that it's difficult to, or it's very easy to patronise your child and to tell them, and you can see them zoning out, they don't want to hear this, they've got to explore it for themselves. But there are risks of them finding out the dangers for themselves, are there not?
There are risks, and parents have very little control over adolescents anyway. So any control that there is there, it's better to use that as influence. So parents can engage with their adolescent children to find out what they're involved in, to show interest, so to keep that connection going, because if there's a blanket, you mustn't use the internet, well, that will just be completely teenage rubble.
And part of this, Jason, is born, let's be honest, of parental ignorance. I mean, there are some parents I know actually say, oh, I don't understand it all. Well, isn't it time we've got to wise up as potential parents or actual parents and get to learn about it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's this interesting concept of who is and who isn't a digital native, who has grown up with this technology. I mean, kids these days have grown up since they have been born. They've grown up with a screen in their hand. They've grown up knowing that everything is touchscreen. Maybe the older generation had VHS and cassette tapes, and that's slightly different. But I think people need to start adapting and realizing the problems that this can bring, the risks, associated with this new technology that is changing rapidly. They need to maybe stay up to date. What,
for instance, are the common sense approaches to how you manage internet use in the home, in your view?
It is just isolating the problems could be one. If you have one main desktop computer in your house, that's all you have to monitor. You could keep a close eye on internet histories, see what your kids are actually viewing, what websites they're going to. There are a slew of apps that you can actually get to monitor internet usage, but the problem with that is you have to then judge how much of a big brother figure you really want to be, and that's another debate, I think, altogether.
There are two schools, well, there's many schools of thought, but at least two approaches. They've got to learn anyway, so leave the whole thing open and have those conversations about being careful, or lock everything down. Is there any right answer there, Noel?
Well, we have to remember the internet is a fantastic, fun-based world of adventure where young people can enhance their reputation, can engage with their peers, and can, with the online reputation, can boost their careers. So we have to keep it in context. There is a downside and there's pitfalls. And that's where education and this Internet Safety Day is critical, because it's alluding to the risks that are associated. But we have to keep mindful that it's a wonderful resource, and it's a modern age that we're only beginning to see the impact of it. When we looked at social change in the past, we had the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution. It wasn't until much later did we see the impact on social change. We're living through an information age now, which we don't really see the impact of maybe till much later.
Just thinking about online reputation or your online digital footprint, there's, again, many schools of thought here as to what's right and wrong to do. You don't want to deny people the opportunity to be a complete killjoy and say, don't post a single picture of anyone having fun, of an athletic success or a family holiday, do you? Or are you of the school of thought which says, well, hang on, if you post a picture of a family holiday, that's probably got geotagging, which shows you where the whole family is. That means if somebody knows where your house is, it's an open invitation for burglars to go around and help themselves.
I think it's being aware of the privacy controls, and a lot of people are not. A lot of adults are not. Right. So it's being aware of
what in terms of the sharing?
Risks. The risks.
So, for instance, family holiday photographs could be shared with your immediate group of friends, but not the whole world. Yeah,
and making sure that the privacy controls are set, that it's not open access.
The one thing about the devices we talked about, you quite rightly said, let's have a family computer, we know what's happening there. But once you get into teens, they've all got a phone. And that phone is not handed over and is probably locked anyway. So how do parents or others check on what's going on, particularly as the phone may well have mobile signal internet rather than relying on the Wi-Fi at home?
Yeah, that's not an easy question. I think that phones are sometimes overlooked as computers. I think that people see the desktop computer as, maybe the main problem, but often now phones are more powerful than that computer. And if you lock down one, that's not getting rid of the problem. Going back to the problem of apps, the amount of apps that you can get on a phone now can sometimes circumvent the privacy altogether. So say you want to lock down the filtering on your computer, so you block a lot of websites from being accessed. On the phone, sometimes there's ways of getting around that if the same links are shared through a social media channel, for example, like Facebook. And as a slight aside, Facebook, Twitter, all these big kind of social media platforms have messaging capabilities of their own built in. So the problem is wide, the problem is broad.
Do you think they have more, or they should take more seriously their responsibilities to make sure their users are safe and stay safe online?
I think most of them do offer a fair degree of protection for the people that know where to look. There is an argument maybe they could do more to advertise that these are in existence, but most of the kind of popular browsers, ISPs, social media platforms do offer filtering and child protection built in. It's just switching it on.
Yeah, so it's knowing that it's there, knowing how to switch it on, not being afraid to ask, which goes for children and adults, really. Because there is an awful lot of help. I mean, in researching this programme, there's a welter of material out there to support everybody, whatever stage they're at, whether you're looking after young people or not. Tell me, Noel, about the increased use of our dialogue, our exchange, our social lives, if you like, being conducted online. I'm wondering, are we breeding a whole generation of young people who find it difficult actually to deal with human interaction, a conversation like you and I are having, because they have become almost entirely dependent on a keyboard-based conversation?
That is, I think, the greater risks is that younger people, I mean, we were chatting outside, the iPhone, I can remember when it came out. Young people today think there's always been smartphones.
Yes.
They're learning about boundaries around relationship forming, around sexuality from the prism of Facebook, Twitter, other social media. That will have an impact on their ability to pick up on social cues, their ability to experience rejection.
I mean, one phrase I've heard is they're sort of digitally autistic. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah.
That actually some of the usual rough and tumble of teenage growing up life is being bypassed, if you like, by retreating into this digital world.
And they're more susceptible to being bullied online, and there's other risks associated.
So how do we empower people to know that that may be something wrong? How do you, if you like, without sounding like my granddad, you know, turn the thing off and go and play outside and get muddy in a field or something instead?
I think it's really just about articulating proper boundary management, to know that the virtual world is the virtual world. Whilst it might be very exciting, it's not really real.
It's only part of life.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not your whole life.
Yeah. So it's about having real connections in the real world, and younger people, particularly young boys that are watching pornography, for instance, there's a thing called a MESA factor, which is machine-enhanced arousal disorder. So they're so mentally in tune with what they want to see online that when they have real
they can't form
relationships,
proper relationships as a result?
There's difficulties with that level of communication.
Money is another issue. Let's talk about being safe with our purchases. I mean, one very good bit of practical advice as we go about our lives, and many of us are buying things and doing usual transactions on our telephones or tablets or whatever. Don't use public Wi-Fi. Why is that? Why does that mantra go out, Jason? Why is that dangerous?
Public Wi-Fi by design is insecure for the fact that transactions, internet communications can very easily be intercepted on a Wi-Fi that is accessible to everyone.
So however convenient it might be,
yeah,
don't complete that clothing purchase or buy your supermarket shopping for food while you're in a public space like that.
Absolutely. There's been studies done where they have set it up maybe under slightly lab conditions, but to see what they can get out of people's data as it's transferring along. So, you know, bank details, if you make that purchase, they're vulnerable. If you are sending an email, your contacts are vulnerable.
I mean, it's not guaranteed it'll happen, but there's an increased risk, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Significantly increased risk.
Absolutely.
So stay safe that way as well, and look after your money. Because, of course, tricksters have always existed, have they not, in society? And that's a hard lesson for a young person to learn. If they make a transaction, buy something, it turns out to be nothing at all the money's gone.
Yes, but with social media, young people's, their ability to trust and to connect is massive because of carrying mobile phones. It's their way of connecting. I think it's just education to allude to the pitfalls that not everyone is who they say they might be.
And that's a tough lesson to learn, but one we should all learn very well. Noel Bell, Jason Murdoch, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
We end with our Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know. And we take to the skies for this one. A Qatar Airways flight has broken the record for the longest ever non-stop commercial flight. It took 16 hours and 23 minutes to fly from Doha in Qatar to New Zealand. Now, on its return journey, it's expected to break another record, taking 17 hours and 30 minutes to arrive at its destination. The previous record for the world's longest scheduled flight by flying time was held by fellow Gulf carrier Emirates. They launched direct flights to Auckland from Dubai in March 2016, though Air India holds the record for the longest flight by distance. Setting a new precedence in air travel, who knows what the future holds. And that's all from me for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.